Recently, there has been another very serious development which threatens the maintenance of the peace in Southwest Asia. Massive Soviet military forces have invaded the small, non-aligned, sovereign nation of Afghanistan, which had hitherto not been an occupied satellite of the Soviet Union. 50,000 heavily armed Soviet troops have crossed the border and are now dispersed throughout Afghanistan, attempting to conquer the fiercely independent Muslim people of that country.
Please don't go. My name is Masood. You must not judge us before you understand why we are not ready to help. Most of the Afghan people are very strong, and we are determined not to be driven from our land. Our children die of disease, mines, and poison gas, and the women are raped and killed.
Last year in the valley of Legman, the next valley, 6,000 Afghans were killed. Pregnant women were cut with bayonets and their babies thrown into the fires. This is done so they will not have to fight the next generation of Afghans. Yet nobody sees anything or reads anything in the papers. What you see here are the Mujahideen soldiers, holy warriors. To us, this war is a holy war. And there's no true death for the Mujahideen because we have taken our last rights and we consider ourselves dead already. To us, death for our land and God is an honor. So, my friend, what we must do is to stop this killing of our women and children. If getting this man free, so he can return to the free world and tell what happens here is necessary, then of course we will help. Leave us now, so we may speak among ourselves and find the best way to free this man.
My name is John, and this is my presentation on why the Soviet Union/USSR fell. First and foremost, it was caused by the Soviet-Afghan War, as presented at the start. The Soviet Union's Vietnam. The nickname was a reference to a 9-year-long war that started on December 25th, 1979 and ended on February 15th, 1989. A major Soviet loss, a victory for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. The reason for the war was the Soviets trying to take over Afghanistan to gain control and make sure American democracy or influence wouldn't touch Afghanistan. This fear of American influence would just add to why the war was a failure. Failure number 1. Economics. The Soviet Union was going through a period of economic stagnation. The Soviet Union was far behind in everything. The communist, socialist-run economy limited economic advancement, stunting much growth. Also, massive military spending. War is costly, so because the USSR invaded Afghanistan and the war lasted for 9 years, lots and much more money would be spent on that war. Failure number 2. American support of the Mujahideen. It's no surprise that America got involved in the war. It's just like the Soviets getting involved in Vietnam by sending in advisors and weapons to the North Vietnamese forces. American involvement would have the CIA involved, and the CIA would come to Afghanistan. What happened here was supplying weapons to the Mujahideen and training them too. The CIA worked closely with Pakistan's Inter Services Intelligence, ISI, which is how the funds and weapons were given to the Mujahideen. Failure number 3, Mujahideen guerrilla tactics. There is no question that the Mujahideen guerrilla tactics were impactful to the war, just like the Viet Cong guerrilla tactics were to American Marines. The Mujahideen had a home field advantage, fought in the Rocky Mountains, and received much aid from the CIA and ISI. The FIM-92 Stinger missile was an iconic weapon of the war, as it was a rocket that could deadlock on a vehicle and track it as it was shot, a predecessor like the Javelin missile rocket. These three major things would be the reason for Soviet forces to pull out in 1988 and fully gone by February 15th, 1989. Soviet defeat and loss. Mujahideen victorious. Facts. Pop culture media. The Mujahideen have made numerous pop culture appearances in media. Rambo 3, for example, as a clip from it was shown earlier. Rambo fights alongside the group against the Soviet invaders, ultimately victorious for the good guys. The Boys. Red Thunder by VOD Studios. In the almost 3-minute clip, Soldier Boy attempted to save his teammates, Crimson Countess, his wife, Gunpowder, his preteen sidekick, and her dossiers. He gets captured and tied up to a pole by the Soviets, getting interrogated by Colonel Yuri Velishvili. That was horrible butchering of that name. Soldier Boy would distract the colonel in time for the TNT twins to kill him. The animated movie, The Breadwinner, is a good movie that represents life after the Soviet-Afghan War. What had happened to the Mujahideen, how life was 10 to 20 years after the war's end, and what effect it had on the Afghan civilian. Metal Gear Solid 5. Ferber told me to add this. Alright, number 2, Chernobyl. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster happened on April 26, 1986, 3 years before the war would end. I will talk about this in my second point and why the Soviet Union fell. But yeah. And the third and final point for facts, rise of Islamist groups. Because of the CIA supported Because the CIA supported the Mujahideen, it would lead to a domino effect. That domino effect was the rise of Islamist groups in Afghanistan, a very well known and later became an enemy to America, the Taliban. The second reason the USSR fell was because of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. From night to morning, April 26, 1986, a group of Chernobyl personnel unexpectedly had to switch shifts with other personnel, even though they were supposed to get off. Now, having to stay overtime, they'd be face to face with the worst disaster faced by the Soviet Union that could have destroyed Europe. Incompetence of the system would lead to the explosion. In the days that followed, to contain the explosion, 31 confirmed dead and thousands died from the radiation. Why did it happen? The Soviet Union, now better known, was incompetent. in running nuclear reactors, as mentioned by Jared Harris, who portrayed Valery Legasov, a vital chemist to the case of Chernobyl. It's a lot to go through, but essentially, the reason why the plant exploded was that the boron rods that were sent against the core didn't mix well with the atoms, and boom!
In the instant the lid is...
The engineers and personnel that day were panicked before and even more after it. The chief in that room was ignorant of the problems, blaming everyone in the room. Even after the explosion, he'd still be ignorant, even at his trial. To sum it up, it would take way too long to explain the whole disaster, so this is what happened. After the explosion, firefighters would come to put the flames out, not knowing they were exposing themselves to radiation. The eggheads would all gather around and discuss, left and right, answers to what had happened. Professor Legasov being a key player in solving the situation, with Boris, I'm gonna butcher this last name, apologies, Sherbina, helping pull strings for men, materials, etc. Also, other scientists contributing to the cause. They'd finally figure out how to close off the core, which was exposed by the explosion, and update everything to make sure another case like this wouldn't happen again, and so Europe was safe. A lot was left out, but watch the series Chernobyl, based on the series by the same name. A lot was left out, but watch the series Chernobyl, based on the same name of the actual event. And other historical channels that talk about this event. Alright, I'm gonna say this quick. The very last and third thing that caused the fall of the USSR was the rise of Gorbachev.
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a nice hot pizza from Pizza Hut.
Gorbachev would be the last swing to chop down the Soviet Union. He reformed the nation. Number one, he introduced economic stabilization. Gorbachev reformed the economy by allowing it to be freer. He allowed limited private businesses, some market-style reforms, less central control over industry. It was great on paper, but in execution, it just led to more problems. The second thing, political openness. Criticize the government without punishment. Allow other political parties to exist. Discussion of failures of the Soviet Union. And yeah. The third thing on here. Eastern Europe breaks up. The Berlin Wall fell as a result of that. Technically, the wall falling was a precursor to the Soviet Union falling, but yeah. And then Eastern Bloc members were allowed to leave basically just the Soviet Union. The fourth thing, the coup attempt in 1991. Other communists disliked this reform from Gorbachev and attempted a coup, which failed as Boris Yeltsin and his group stopped that. If I remember correctly, Boris had a tank. And the last thing, the Soviet Union falls in 1991. If I'm correct, October 7th, 1991. The reasons for the fall of the Soviet Union was because of the Afghan War, Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and Gorbachev. That's all. Whew.
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a nice hot pizza from Pizza Hut.